If you really follow the Golden State Warriors, you know there is a silent pain happening right now. The feeling that the team has talent, has pieces, but has not yet found the adjustment that separates a competitive squad from a team that really scares the West. Every fan feels this. The question is not if something needs to change, it's what and when. And that's exactly where Jonathan Kuminga comes in. Because what is being discussed behind the scenes is not a detail. It is a decision that can unlock the potential of the squad, redefine hierarchies, and change the way the Warriors are seen at the conference. Today, you'll understand why this change could be the turning point the team needed and why the entire West needs to pay attention now. Before continuing, do the following quickly. Leave a like now because this helps the video reach more Warriors fans. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any behind-the-scenes updates, and activate the bell to receive everything firsthand when it comes out. And comment below without thinking too much. Is Kuminga a player to explode on the team, or would you make a more radical change? I'm going to read the comments because that guides the next videos. Now stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you what this change really means, where it changes the cast, and why it could turn the key to the West faster than most imagine. Let's do it. Dub Nation, I need you to follow me closely here, because the Golden State Warriors landscape is about to change in ways that many people haven't even realized yet. And I'm not talking about internet rumors or empty social media chatter. I'm talking about that type of movement that is born away from the spotlight, grows in silence, and when you see it, it has already become reality. So if you like to understand what's going on behind the decisions, stay with me until the end, because today's issue could change the direction of the franchise for years. I'll be very direct. There is something taking shape behind the scenes that could change the Warriors' logic in the short term and, at the same time, redesign how the West looks at this team. And the center of this story is a player who became a sensitive point within the organization, a name that divides opinion, that provokes debate, that raises difficult questions, and that is now in the middle of a crossroads that can no longer be ignored. Jonathan Kuminga. And before anyone thinks, here comes another one, let me explain why this is different. Anyone who follows the Warriors carefully learns one thing over time. You can feel when something is really taking shape and when it's just noise. There are signs. There are decisions that in isolation seem small, but when you put everything on the same timeline, you notice a pattern. And what I'm seeing, and what has been commented on by people connected to the league environment, indicates that we are facing a turning point. Those weeks where what is decided doesn't just affect the rotation of the next game, affects the direction of the project. The Warriors have been going through a complex moment for a few seasons now. It is a period of transition that is not simple for any franchise, and especially not simple for a team that has already experienced its absolute peak, has won everything, and built an identity so strong that any change feels like an earthquake. At the same time, you have the present, which demands results, and you have the future, which requires construction. And these two things don't always go together at the same pace. Because on the one hand, there is a winning core, a base that changed the recent history of the NBA and that still carries enormous weight within the locker room and the team's culture. These are players who deserve to compete, who have already proven who they are and who are not here to make a slow transition. On the other hand, there is a need to prepare the ground for when time does what it always does, push the franchise into a new phase. The question is, how do you do this without getting lost along the way? The Warriors tried to balance both. He drafted well, brought young talent, bet on potential, tried to fit these pieces into a system that already had clear owners, very defined roles, and a way of playing that requires reading, discipline, maturity, and consistency. But development is not linear, and when you're trying to win now, every mistake becomes a bigger problem because the margin for patience decreases. This is exactly why Kuminga became a symbol of this tension. When he arrived, the feeling was of a future in hand. Impressive physical tools, above-average athleticism, real potential on both sides of the court, and the kind of ceiling that makes any fan imagine what could happen if everything came together. The idea was clear. Today he learns, tomorrow he contributes, then he becomes a protagonist. A logical path, Beautiful. But the NBA doesn't respect the script. The NBA demands proof, and what we saw with Kuminga over time was a portrait of that. In some moments, he looks exactly like the player he dreamed of, aggressive attacking the basket, capable of deciding body shots with flashes of dominance that make you think, ready, it's now. There are games in which he shows signs of a future all-star because he creates an advantage with explosion, finishes with strength, and when committed, defends multiple positions with valuable versatility. But there was also the other side, inconsistency. And not just the inconsistency of performance, but the inconsistency of usage. This is what confuses fans the most, and often what hurts a young player the most. Because there is a big difference between making a mistake while playing and not playing. In certain sections, Kuminga simply disappears. In big games, in decisive moments, in situations where you think he could at least have space to make an impact, he's out. And when this happens repeatedly, the message is stark. Trust is not consolidated. This tension was even more evident in the contractual issue. Kuminga has reached that point where a young player, with potential and moments of brilliance, begins to see his own value and wants the organization to see it along. He wanted an extension that reflected what he believes it can be and the role he understands it should have. On the Warriors' side, the stance was more cautious, not necessarily due to a lack of talent, but due to doubts about fit, consistency, reading the system, and mainly about how much it would be worth committing big money without being sure of the return. The impasse dragged on, fueled speculation, opened space for trade talks, and the question gained strength. Is his future really in Golden State, or could this story end with each side following its own path? The solution ended up coming with a 2-year extension, worth $48.5 million. On paper, it looks like a deal, a kind of let's move forward together. But those who are used to reading the league understand the subtext. 2 years is not enough for a player of that age. It's short. Keep doors open for the team and the athlete. It is a contract that does not close the discussion. He postpones the verdict, and then the season progresses. At times, Kuminga shows evolution. He seems more confident in certain readings, more firm in some parts of the game, more prepared to take on responsibilities. But then interruptions come in, like the knee problem that took him out for a while. And when he returns, what should be a return with a clear plan turns into an even more unstable scenario. Games with relevant minutes, games with timid minutes, games with participation fluctuating without the fan being able to understand exactly what the vision is for him. And here comes a point that, in my opinion, changes the weight of the conversation. The situation in which he was healthy scratch in a large victory without playing a single minute, even though he was available. This is very strong. It's not common, and the context matters. A 23-year-old player, former lottery pick, with a high salary for the season, being blank in a game where the score already allows testing rotations and distributing minutes, is a message that doesn't need a collective to be understood. When this happens, it can no longer be treated as a detail. You can discuss 1,000 things: fit, defense, consistency, posture, reading, decision-making. But the fact is that the organization is telling you, in practice, that there is real concern. And that's where the story gets even more interesting because, meanwhile, there's a team watching everything closely for months: the Phoenix Suns. The Suns have had interest in Kuminga for some time, and that interest hasn't disappeared despite his up-and-down season. Phoenix is looking for exactly the profile he represents: a young, athletic winger with the ability to score, run the court, bring energy, and, in theory, offer defensive versatility. And the most curious thing is that this connection didn't start yesterday. Back then, there was already talk of larger conversation structures involving giant names, and Kuminga appeared as a valuable piece at the table. That didn't become reality, but the Suns' attention remained. What is circulating behind the scenes is that there were conversations, there were ideas, there were exchange models discussed. It wasn't something superficial. It was serious enough for both sides to evaluate packages and try to understand what might make sense. And when you hear names like Royce O'Neal and Nick Richards being mentioned in possible return scenarios, you understand what the Warriors' logic would be: receiving pieces that help now, that enter the rotation, that deliver specific things without needing a long adaptation. Because the whole point of the Warriors is not, let's rebuild. The central point is how to keep the team competitive around Stephen Curry and what is still believed to be a real window of contention. This is the engine of urgency. And so the conversation about Kuminga is not just about future potential. It's about the cost of waiting for that potential to transform, come true when the present clock doesn't stop. And then comes the detail that changes everything within the calendar: eligibility for exchange. According to information that has been discussed, the Warriors would be willing to discuss trades involving Kuminga as soon as he can be moved again on January 15th, the date on which players who signed an extension become eligible to be traded again. And if that happens, the message is even more direct. The team is willing to explore the market shortly after extending the player. This is not something that is done by chance, because there is a big difference between listening to offers and looking for alternatives. And the impression that remains, given the way things have been shaping up, is that the Warriors are trying to understand whether it is possible to transform Kuminga's salary in the range of $22.5 million into a construction that better meets immediate needs. In other words, using this piece to put together something that fits more with the playoff race and what is imagined to be necessary in big games. On the Suns' side, the reading is one of opportunity. The team is having a positive campaign, believes it is close to being a real threat, and has a very talented core, but which also carries the pressure of now. When your base is made up of stars with a lot of league mileage, you're not thinking about 5 years. You're thinking about this season and the next. And a young player with energy who can defend wings and run the court becomes a tempting fit. Furthermore, there is an aspect that many people forget when talking about development: environment and function. Not every young person evolves better when they need to create everything. Sometimes the leap happens when he plays alongside stars who attract marking, who organize the attack, and who allow him to focus on clear points. Attacking spaces, finishing in transition, being intense in defense, doing the simple things with strength. For some players, a change of scenery unlocks exactly what was trapped by context. But now comes the tricky part: the package. Because for the Warriors, trading a young man with a high ceiling for rotation pieces really needs to make sense. Phoenix is not a franchise full of available draft picks, and the squad is more top-heavy, with large contracts concentrated. So the salary mathematics and the real value of the return become a puzzle. O'Neal, for example, is a name that makes sense as a complement. He is that functional player who defends, shoots, doesn't need the ball all the time, fits in without demanding protagonism. The kind of piece that could help a playoff rotation. But the question remains, is this enough to give up Kuminga? On paper, a lot of people would say no, because Kuminga's ceiling is higher than the immediate impact of a solid role player. But the role doesn't live in the Warriors' day-to-day life. If internally the assessment is that the fit will not happen as expected, if the staff does not trust him in decisive minutes, if the irregularity weighs more than the potential, then the calculation changes. Then the Warriors might prefer something less shiny and more reliable now. And it doesn't stop there, because there is another important element: competition. There are signs that the Sacramento Kings also have interest in Kuminga, and that this interest goes back a long way. And that, for the Warriors, is gold. Because when you have more than one suitor, you gain leverage. You compare proposals, force better conditions, choose the package that best fits. And when two teams from the same West are looking at the same player, it's because the league overall still sees high value in him, even if the Warriors aren't extracting it consistently. Now, let me open a parenthesis about what this represents strategically. If the Warriors trade Kuminga, the franchise is publicly making a choice: maximize the gift. It's saying without saying that the focus is on giving Curry the best possible chance over the next 2 or 3 years, even if it comes at the cost of long-term flexibility. For a team that has already won 4 titles with this core, many people will argue that this is fair. that the commitment to the current window is a kind of moral debt with what this player delivered to the franchise. But of course, there is a risk on the other side, and this risk is huge. What if Kuminga goes to a team that puts him in a clearer role, with consistent minutes, with room to make mistakes, and he explodes? What if it becomes exactly what many believe it can become? The criticism will be heavy, because the NBA loves these went out and became a star stories, and the narrative falls hard on those who gave up too soon. So the decision is not simple. It's not change soon, and that's it. The Warriors, if they decide to do this, need to have a plan. You need to know what you want to build with the return, because there's no point in moving the piece and receiving names that don't resolve what needs to be resolved. Exchange in itself is not victory. Victory is what you do with what comes back. And then the human side of things also comes into play, which is where the fans feel it most. There are many people who have become attached to Kuminga as a symbol of the future, like that player who could lead the Warriors to the next phase. And honestly, I understand. It's hard to let go of a dream when you've gotten used to imagining what it could be. But there is a point at which the team needs to choose between insisting out of hope and acting out of conviction. If the staff doesn't trust him in the moments that decide the season, if the role remains unstable, if the fit continues to feel like a foreign body within the system, perhaps the best thing for everyone is to admit that it didn't work as planned, because Kuminga also deserves a place where he can truly play, where he can continue, where he can make mistakes and learn without feeling that any mistake costs him the bench in the next game. And the Warriors deserve to have a rotation where the pieces are aligned with what the team wants to do in April, May, and June, which brings us to the clock of this story. January 15th appears as a milestone. Until then, there are enough games to note a detail that could change the conversation: its use. If the Warriors stabilize Kuminga's role, if he starts to get consistent minutes, if the staff shows practical confidence, it could indicate a real attempt to make it work. If, on the contrary, the oscillation continues, if the bank continues to be a frequent possibility, if the message remains ambiguous, then the path becomes increasingly evident. And now I want to bring you into this, because this is not a cold discussion. It messes with the team's identity. So I ask you very directly, if you were the Warriors today, would you try to insist a little more and bet that the fit will appear? Or do you understand that the team needs to transform this asset into more ready-made pieces that are more compatible with the urgency of the current window? And if it were to be exchanged, what would you demand in return? Do you prefer depth, a reliable perimeter defender, a rotation pivot, a player who spaces the court and can handle physical defense in the playoffs? Or would you only accept a trade if there was a greater impact? Because this is where the conversation gets serious. The price you accept defines whether it was a smart move or an announced regret. The fact is that this is the type of decision that doesn't just appear in the box score. It appears in the next few years. It appears in the way the Warriors will be seen by the market. It shows in how young players look at the franchise. It appears in the way the team will structure itself to compete. And mainly, it appears in the size of the chance you give to your present without completely destroying your future. From now on, every sign counts. Every rotation, every decision in a game that has already been decided, every sequence of minutes, every didn't come in today will be interpreted as a clue. And on the other side, every piece of information about the Suns' interest, every mention of the Kings, every detail about possible packages will increase the pressure. Because when the market realizes that you can trade, the market moves. So here's the thing. If you want to follow this story clearly, with context and without noise, stay with me here. I will continue to bring you everything that comes up, explaining what makes sense and what doesn't, and most importantly, connecting the dots so you understand the why behind the headlines. Now I want you to do your part too. Write to me in the comments what you would do with Kuminga. Exchange or keep? And if exchanged, for whom? I want to read your perspective, because this is one of those conversations every Warriors fan needs to have. And if you want to stay ahead of each development, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the bell. This story will not be resolved slowly. It has a date on the calendar, it has behind-the-scenes pressure, and it has a real impact on the West. And I'll be here following everything, step by step, until we understand what the next chapter for the Golden State Warriors will be. And now I want you to stop for a second and think about what we just unpacked here. Because this isn't just about Jonathan Kuminga. It's about direction. It's about identity. It's about the Warriors deciding once and for all whether they're going to insist on their promise or whether they're going to turn that promise into immediate fuel to chase another real chance at the top. And when a team of this size arrives at this type of crossroads, the entire league feels it. The entire West feels it. Because the truth is simple. When the Golden State Warriors move, it's not just any news. It's a sign. It's a message to the other contenders. It is a line being drawn on the ground saying, "We are still here." And if this change happens, it doesn't just affect the rotation of a game. It affects the market, the pieces on the board, the responses of rivals, and the way each fracturing inquire will prepare to face the Warriors from now on. So stay tuned, because from now on, every detail matters. Every minute that Kuminga plays or doesn't play is a clue. Each leaked conversation, each name linked to possible exchanges, each behind-the-scenes movement is a piece falling into place. And when these dominoes start to fall, there won't be time to understand later. Whoever is following now will see it first. And if you want to continue on this front with quick updates, real context, and behind-the-scenes reading, I'm going to ask you something very direct. Go to the pinned comment and click on the playlist Golden State Warriors News Today. Because there I left everything organized in sequence, in the right way, for you to marathon and understand this story as it really is. A process, not an isolated post. Watch the next videos on the playlist because what comes now could be exactly the chapter that changes the season. And enjoy. Like, subscribe, and activate the bell because when this bomb goes off for good, I want you to get here before everyone else. Go to the playlist in the comment pinned now, and we follow together, game by game, decision by decision, until we discover the next move that can turn the West around.